Welcome to the Cooperative Lakes Monitoring Program 2026 Summer Check-in. We do this the middle of each summer, kind of in the middle of the field season, just to have a chance to highlight some tips and some tricks that we have for you to make sure you have the most successful monitoring season possible. And it's also a chance for you to ask any questions you have, because sometimes you're going through the training in the spring and you're like, yep, this all makes sense. But then when you actually get out on the lake, occasionally things may not make as much sense to you, or you run into a nuance or a question that you have. So we can cover those questions today. First, some introductions. So I'm Jo Latimore. I'm a faculty member in the Department of Fisheries and Wildlife. I'm also the director of the MiCorps program and have been involved in different aspects of MiCorps, including lake monitoring and stream monitoring, actually my entire professional career, so about 22 years. And so it's always one of my favorite parts of my job is working with all of you on this program and making sure that the data are the best they can be and used as widely as they can be. And I'm joined by my colleague Erick, and I'll let him introduce himself.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to see many Ericks in this room, although it's very strange. So, hello. Um, yeah, I work a lot with Joe. I'm the CLMP lake manager. And so you get all of these communications from me. I help all of you collect the best data you can. And so, yeah, I've been working on lakes for a long time too. I've been at MSU Extension for around 10 years, and I've been working at some degree with the CLMP since I began. So, um, glad to be with you all this morning. And so, Joe, I'll just keep going from here.
All right, thank you so much.
If I can click. There we go. So, as many of you probably seen, we have a new website that we kicked off a few months ago. And Joe and I thought that it might be nice to do a quick tutorial. We're going to give you some specifics as we go through the slide deck to really show you step by step, but I'll just give you the quickest of demos. We're going to go live into the site right now. And I'll show you where to find some basic things, and then we'll go into more detail as we go through this morning. So first, Joe, can you see the website?
Yes, you're showing the live website.
All right. Okay, so here's what our new website looks like, MiCorps.net. For lake monitoring, that's where I'm going to be focusing most of my 2 minutes here on, is you can access everything by hovering over lakes and clicking here. Once you click lakes, you can get to almost everything about lake monitoring from this first one. So for example, if you click on it, it will take you to a base page where then you can follow tiles. So a lot of our organization in our new website is by what we call a tile. And so you can, if you are new and want to become a volunteer, you can click on Become a Volunteer. And now it shows you all the different steps that you can take. And then you can get into the enrollment system by clicking on this blue bar. I'm going to show you this too, because if you do have assisting volunteers and you are moving them through the enrollment process, because you remember assisting volunteers also need to be enrolled, you can send them to this page, Become a Lake Monitoring Volunteer. They can read up about what it all takes to become a volunteer and then click here to enroll. Now going back, you can just hit the back button, or you can look up here and you can see that we can go back to that lake monitoring section, scroll back down to our tiles. And what we've done, this is a big part that's new this year, is how to access the different information training on the different parameters. And so if you click on monitoring parameters, you'll see that now we have a tile for each thing that you can enroll for. And we have our basic water quality parameters up here. And then when you scroll down, you can see our advanced parameters. Also, if you're talking with your lake association, you just want to brush up on a couple things. We have a parameters at a glance right below this, and it shows every single parameter, how much it costs, just a little bit of information about what is a Secchi disc and all those things. It's something that you might want to communicate out to others that you're working with or communicating with. And it goes through all of that. But now let's say you want to get into a little bit more meat. You're like, oh no, I forgot or I've lost my data sheet for SecuDisk. So what you can do is click on SecuDisk. You can see that there's a little bit more information on what a SecuDisk is, details about it, but then you get down to how do I measure SecuDisk transparency? And here's the protocol, a quick protocol, and there's the data sheet right there. And if you click on that, you'll get to the PDF that you can print off. And that's what it's like for every single parameter. One more thing that I want to show is this is also now embedded in each parameter page. You can get to a training and video. And so we do an online training every year, as many of you know. We record those and we break it up into individual parameters. So this is our SecuDisk around 30-minute presentation on how to do it and all the details. But then we also, for many of the parameters, have a quick video. So this is only a couple minutes long. You can play it within here, or you can even watch it in YouTube itself and expand and make a big video. And so everything you want to know about each parameter should be found in each of these tiles. So let's go back to the home. So here we are back on the home page. Again, a lot of that was lake monitoring, and then you can go from there. But now let's say, you're inspired to enter some of your Seki data tomorrow that you've been collecting this summer. You can hover over the enter and view lake tile. And when you click that, now you have a few options. You can view data, which brings you to our database. You can find and download all of your raw data. Joe's going to talk a little bit about that. You can enter data. So you click there, and this is where you enter, and it brings you to your login page, and then you can enter data. Also, we have a new spot where your individual lake reports are. So this is your kind of your raw data that you can find on your lake. But if you want just that summary report, you can click reports. We have our individual lake reports, and then you can type in different independents. And so now you can see here's Independent Marquette, and here's the latest one in 2025. But I also can get to some of the older ones as well, which could be handy if you're trying to look back in time. So there's the quickest tutorial. Before I move on, if anyone wants to even unmute, or Joe, if I see you're answering away, is there anything you would like me to show you on the live website before we move on? All right. Excellent. So I'll get back to the presentation. We're very happy with our website, how it has turned out. So it takes a while to move from one old website to another, but please let us know. We have folks that we can make edits, and we have IT people who can help us make big edits. So if there's anything that you see or that you wish was out there, or on the website, or you can't find, please let us know, and we can look into those changes or additions. Okay, so just going over our summer monitoring schedule. So just a quick review, just for folks you can be in all of these, or you're thinking about being in them next year, but we just wanted to give a quick review. So as you know, SecuDisk, what we ask for is a minimum of collecting every other week throughout the summer. So starting in May, going through September. If you want to collect more frequently, like let's say every week, that's great. We totally accept that into our database. And that gives you even better clarity of time series data, and can tell you some neat things. But at a minimum, we want 2 collections every month, spread out a little bit so we can get a good glimpse of what's going on. Summer phosphorus is coming up, by the way, for folks enrolled in summer phosphorus. We are going to be mailing them out next week. So you will be getting the bottles, the data sheets, the schedule, all paper form in the mail. We'll just say in the next 2 weeks, as long as it takes to get through the mail system. So for summer phosphorus, you are collecting just once, and what we're doing there is collecting at the height of summer stratification, and that occurs in different in the latitude of our state, and so Folks up in the UP and the northern lower will be collecting earlier than people lower in the state who will be collecting in September. We give you those exact spread of dates in the summer phosphorus schedule, which I'll show here in a moment. Chlorophyll, for you all who have been collecting so far, it's once per month. We give you the range of dates to collect. And it's the same for each month except for September, the final chlorophyll collection. And so please look at your schedule. The UP lakes will be collecting their fifth and final sample at the very end of August. And how the calendar ends this year is also the northern lower counties will also be collecting in the end of August. Dissolved oxygen temperature. We also kind of like to carry it along with the SECI, so every other week throughout the summer. You're more than welcome to collect more often, but at a minimum, every other week from May through September. Now for these last three, the plant watch, score the shore, and aquatic plant mapping. These can be done at any time during the summer. Now, plant watch and plant mapping, we like to capture, we like to survey in the height of when all the plants are available. So looking through June through August is the best, but you can collect any time during that time period. And you can also do it over multiple days. If you don't get the whole lake done or your whole survey done in one day, totally okay. Just note that on your data sheets, and that is totally fine. You score the shore is a great example of one that if you're on a large lake, it's more than likely going to take more than one day. That's totally okay. Just write it on your data sheet. So here is a little bit more detail. Our summer phosphorus and chlorophyll schedules look like this. So you will be getting, you can see this online now, and you will get this in the mail shortly. If you are in chlorophyll, you have already gotten this in the mail, and you can find it online. But you will look up, if you're in Elgin County, you will be turning it into the Eagle Kalamazoo District Office, and here's the address. And also we have a local drop-off location individual there. So Dina is the person that you'll be dropping off your samples with or to, and you can contact her if you have some questions. Then we also have sampling dates. So we are in the midst of sample number 3, which is July 10th through the 20th. So if you're collecting chlorophyll, please collect it during this time span. And then look at the drop off or the turn in dates. So we've already gone through the early drop off of June 30th, but for Elgin, if your lake is in Elgin County, for example, you'll be dropping off September 22nd. These drop off periods are all between 8 and noon. And the reason why it's such a tight time window is because we need to get them in the mail frozen and has to get to us overnight. And so in order for that to happen, we need to drop them off at our UPS stores enough for overnight to reach us the next day so we can sample them with high confidence that they're in good shape. So just to review, I kind of show this, but if you're looking up how to find this, you can hover over, you can click on lakes, what you can monitor, and then click on summer phosphorus. Then you can scroll down and you'll see 2026 summer phosphorus sampling schedule, and that will give you the information you need. Just want to give a little bit more details. I kind of covered some of this, but if you are in Ontonagon, Gogebic, Houghton, Keweenaw, or Baraga, so this is in the western UP, just due to the location of where the UPS store is, your window to drop off is much tighter. So if you're in those counties, please drop off your sample in the location that's specified in the schedule. Please drop off those samples between 8 and 10 a.m., which is quite tight. So if that time does not work, and actually this goes for everybody across the state, if something happens and you cannot make the drop-off date or drop-off time, please contact me. We can chat about what is possible. It might be that you have to do an individual mailing, or what we can do is reach out to your local person, and they might accept an early sample. But you will need to reach out. Don't assume that they can take it. Many of these doors might be locked, and as they're eagle locations that don't have a public entrance always. Also, just as a note, as a tip, is there are likely volunteers near you, other volunteers on other lakes. And sometimes some of these areas you do have to travel quite a distance to your drop-off location. You can definitely work with each other and give your frozen samples to one person and they can drive all of the samples to the drop-off location. And so if you want to know if you have other people in your area around you, let us know, give us a call, and we can start that process. You know, more hands make easy. I don't know, I'm terrible at those things. Teamwork makes the dream work, I'll just say. Um, so again, though, to reiterate, if you're having any problems or you're going to run into any issues with drop-off, please let us know ahead of time. We're happy to work with you. And it might be to work with another volunteer, or we'll find something better to do. I want to mention, for people in Elgin, Barry, Berrien, Cass, Kalamazoo, St. Joseph, or Van Buren counties, you have a new drop-off location. Eagle moved, and this is their address. And I'm going to show you, there's some trickiness with that one, so I'm going to show you a little bit more. But I just want to emphasize, please review your schedule, all of you, so you know where to go. Washtenaw is also a new location. The Huron River Watershed Council is a new drop-off location for lakes in Washtenaw County. And then, as you all know, if you're actually all of you may know who are returning volunteers, is Jean Roth had retired from the CLMP from MiCorps, and she was a drop-off location in Northeast Michigan. Now, for these counties, you are going to be dropping off at the MSU Extension Office in West Branch. So here's that information there. For folks in Kalamazoo, if anyone is in Kalamazoo for the Kalamazoo drop-off, there is some confusion of where to go here. So this is where the address will take you. I will send out an email to everybody so you have this handy. But there are two entry points. This location actually has a sign that says Eagle, come in here, but that is not meant for the public. The public entrance is right here. And again, I will email this to everybody in the Kalamazoo district area. Okay, just kind of rounding off some of the things I'm going to talk about is all enrollment is closed except for our exotic aquatic plant watch and Score the Shore. You can still enroll in these parameters all the way till August 31st. So if you get an itch to look at your invasive species or erosion on your shoreline, you can still enroll by going into the system and adding this to your order. If anyone is from the UP, we have partnered with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources, and they have funds for free enrollment for any lake in the UP who wants to be in the plant watch, and they'll also send over a sampling kit. So lucky for anybody in the UP. If this is something you're interested in learning more about, please contact Joe or I, and we will get you set up. We're going to make it nice and easy. The DNR will mail you this a sampling kit, meaning a rake and books and other things, and we'll get you all set up in enrollment. Okay, so the final thing that I'm going to mention before Joe jumps on is assisting volunteers. Much of the communication goes to lead volunteers, and then it's up to the lead volunteers to pass on information and to make sure of one thing. We really would like our assisting volunteers to be trained. And training is really important because, as you know, there's a lot of nuance to even some of our simple protocols. There's a lot of nuance, and we want to make sure the quality of data is the highest. When we review the samples for chlorophyll and phosphorus that we have to reject, it's oftentimes from an assisting volunteer. And so we want to just make sure that everybody's data is great. We want to make sure it's useful to everyone. So please have your assisting volunteers go through training. And so you can go to the lake monitoring and then training page. And what you'll see here is we have of course, our in-person trainings, which is over, and our online training, which is over. But since we recorded our online training, you can just go to monitoring parameter pages, click on that, and then for each parameter that an assisting volunteer is in, every parameter that you as a lake are signed up for, you can have them watch the video of training to make sure that everybody's up to speed. And then on that note, we also would like for everyone to be enrolled, your assisting volunteers to be enrolled so that they can sign the waiver, but then also add the lake to their account. So we have a lot of assisting volunteers in our system that we don't know who they are volunteering for or which lake they're volunteering on. And so if you work with assisting volunteers, please have them go through the enrollment system and choose assisting volunteers, but then have them sign back in, and so they can log in. Well, maybe they can log in. They would put in their username and password that they had created when they signed up, and then they'll see this, and all lead volunteers have seen this where it says add your lakes to your account. That's where you'd start here, and they will add the lake that they're on. So one of the benefits of this is then we can recognize our assisting volunteers through time. We have some assisting volunteers been volunteering for 20 plus years. And so it's great to know that information so that we can recognize all of their efforts. And then I'll pass it on to Joe.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. Before I cover the slides that I'm going to touch on that focus on entering your data, how to find your data, and also walking through some of our different parameters and giving you some tips and tricks on how to be more successful, I'd like to go through some of the questions that were entered and answered in the chat, just so we have those answered aloud in the video. So we had a couple of questions about wildfire smoke and how they may impact our results and sampling. First of all, I think most of the state at this point is experiencing some degree of wildfire smoke right now. And the questions are good ones that you're thinking about how that might impact your water quality. Don't change the way you sample on the dates and times that you normally would. But when you do so, it's useful if you make a note on your data sheet. All our data sheets have a place for you to record unusual conditions, and please record if it's smoky when you're doing your collections, or note that it's been smoky in the previous days. That's really interesting because then we can look at this summer's data and see if we see any kind of signature from the impacts of wildfire smoke. There is some research on the impacts of wildfires on lake systems, and so it may be very interesting to see if we do see any kind of signature. So don't change what your plans are for monitoring. Collect data as you always do. That's the value of long-term monitoring, is we can see potentially impacts of things like this. So good questions on that. Regarding the website, we've got some compliments on the website, so we appreciate that. It was a lot of work. And then we'll also clarify, and you can even see on the screen here, there's parts of the website that still look old. And so, yes, the new website is live. In fact, what you're seeing on your screen there gives a little hint of that. The dark blue border, that shows you when you're on the new website. But if you go to look at data or enter data, you'll see it's still kind of a pale purpley blue. That's the when you're in your actual data system, and that still looks like the old website. And that's because we're still working on updates to that side of the website. So everything Eric showed you about the new website is absolutely live, and you can use it right now. But when you move into the data system, you'll see that it still looks like the old site. Nothing wrong. Your computer's working just fine. Another questions were about sample turn-in. If any of you, like Greg, maybe missed a sample or forgot to turn things in, keep sampling as you did. If you forgot or weren't able to turn in a sample like spring phosphorus or early season chlorophyll this spring, just hold on to it in your freezer, because we have another turn-in opportunity at the end of the summer, and just include all of those samples then. And make sure they don't get buried under all your frozen peas and produce from the summer and you forget about them. So you still can turn things in. You don't need to make special arrangements right now. And then the final question was about can I pick a different turn-in location? Maybe you look at the list of drop-off locations and there's one that's not your assigned drop-off location, but it's more convenient for you. We'd prefer that you contact us directly about those questions, about maybe, the question asker asked about, they're assigned to turn in to the Livingston County drop off and Washtenaw is more convenient for them. It can get tricky because if your sampling dates are different, it may have you sampling after when the turn-in date is for your more convenient drop-off location. So just reach out to us and we can give you advice on whether a different drop-off location is a possibility for you.
And I believe that is the case for the Livingston
I
Washtenaw.
think it is. Yeah, that it's not going to work to
That's
do
right.
that, but we'll confirm that with you if you reach out to us. All right. Well, keep the questions coming in the chat. In the meantime, I'll dive into some more slides. So, how to enter your data. A really important role of our volunteers is actually entering the data into the website. And so, you can enter data from your lake at any time up through the end of October, October 31st. After that, we ask you not to enter any more data. You may be able to, technically. However, at that point, we start entering data that wasn't entered by volunteers. So if we're in the middle of entering your data and then you go in and enter it, then we get duplicates in the database. So if October 31 has passed, maybe you meant to enter the data, but if you didn't, it's okay. We'll take it from there. So after October 31st, we'll take over entering data from there. And another thing to think about, we get this question a lot, is, well, sure, I'll enter my SECI data and maybe I'm doing plant watch, I'll enter that data, but I don't have the data for phosphorus. The lab has the data, but that's not entirely true. You can still enter the data from your data sheet, the date you sampled, the location, conditions, all that information needs to get into the database. And then you do that part. And then when we get the result from the lab, we'll just add the analytical result to the database. So we need your help entering all of the parameters, including phosphorus and chlorophyll. And here's how you do it. So if you're on the home page and you find those tiles, like Eric showed you before, there's a tile called Lake and Stream Data. And you just click on Lake and Stream Data, and then you'll have the choice to enter data, view data, or look at reports. Just click on enter data, pretty obviously, because that's what you're there to do. And then you'll see the next image, what you see in step 2. And at the very top, all you need to look at, there's a button that says lakes. Click on lakes in step 2. And then after you click on lakes, you'll see that bottom left screen, and you just click on the name of your lake. For most of you, the only lake that will be showing will be your lake. Because that's the lake you are enrolled in. So just click on the name of the lake and then you can start entering data. And that's when you'll see the screen that you see on the right-hand side of the slide. And the first thing you should do is take a quick look at that lake site information at the top of the screen, that gray box that has the lake name, county, and other location information. Just confirm you're in the right lake, that there's no problem there. Make sure that looks right, and then you can start entering a new sample is what we call it. So just click whatever parameter you're going to be entering, SECI, phosphorus, chlorophyll, and so on. And so that's how you enter data. As soon as you click on, say, SECI, it'll open up a screen that will look very much like your data sheet, and you can just type in the information right off your data sheet. So that's how we enter data. Next slide. Now, after you do that, or at any time, you can go into the database and see all the data about your lake. Some people like to do this right after they've entered data to make sure that it was entered correctly. That's a great way to check. But you can go back in history and look for data on your lake or any lake in our system. So again, step 1, there on that home screen, it's the same. Click on the lake and stream data tile. And then on step 2, click on view data, not enter data, but view data. And that will take you to step 3 and 4 on the right there. So you can search by streams or lakes. Of course, for CLMP, you'd want to click on lakes. And then you can search by a number of different things. Most people search by lake name. So you can just click lake name and then type that lake name next to the magnifying glass. And it will fill in a list of lakes, and you pick your lake. In this example, we're using Badger Lake. Just click on the name and it will add it to the list on the right. Then you can, under step 4, you can specify a date range. If you want to see all the data from your lake, you can leave it as is. If you just want to see this year or 5 years, you can change those dates however you wish. You need to select at least one sampling parameter or select them all by checking and unchecking those boxes. Leave data tier as is, so you'll see all of the MiCorps data. And then you can either click view results, which is what most people want to do. However, you can also download all the data into an Excel spreadsheet if you'd rather have your own file that holds all the data and you can manipulate it how you want. But for most cases, just click view results, and on the screen, all of the data for your lake will appear. All right, so checking your data, the last spot, here's what we were getting at. Let's say that you just put in, I want to see all the lakes, and you didn't even pick a particular name. Here's what you might see. Just a snippet of that. The first couple lakes that showed up, we've got Hubbard 6, a site on Hubbard Lake in Elgin County. You're also seeing Duck Lake in Elgin County. And you can see, here's some Secchi data showing up. And then you can go in, you can click on a day and see all the details about that measurement. You can click on view graph and you can see an actual graph or plot of the data over time for that lake. There's a lot of ways to interact with the data on our website. And so this is what you'll see for the lakes that you selected. All right. Tips and tricks about actually doing measurements. So here's a quick question that will quiz your knowledge really quickly about taking a Secchi disc measurement, which I think all of you have experience doing. If you're measuring the Secchi disc depth for your lake when you're out sampling, do you look at the measuring tape and record the measurement from the top of the boat or from the top of the water? A or B? You can type it in the chat if you want. Where do you measure the Secchi from? Well, it looks like Erick Elgin is repeatedly getting this answer right. Good job.
Eric knows.
Erick knows how to do a Secchi. Yeah. It sometimes can be easy, or if you're just not kind of thinking it through, to record the measurement of the tape that you can see right at the edge of your boat, but that's not accurate. If we think about it scientifically, we're trying to see how much water you can see through. So record whatever your tape measure says at the top of the water's edge there. And remember, you only need to be accurate and record to the nearest half foot, the nearest 6 inches. So 2 feet, 2.5 feet, 3 feet. It doesn't have to be 2.2134 inches. You don't need to be that specific. It's the nearest half foot that you need to record from. So yes, measure to the water. Another thing I'll point out on this slide, is there anything you can see that this volunteer is doing incorrectly besides trying to figure out where to collect her measurement from?
Sunglasses on.
That's right, David. Yes, sunglasses. Several of you got it right. So yes, you don't want to wear sunglasses when you're taking a Secchi disc measurement, because sunglasses, and especially polarized sunglasses, which many of us own, they help you see further into the water. And so if you wear them on one measurement and the next one you don't, that's going to skew your results. So remove those sunglasses, do it on the shaded side of the boat so you don't have a glare in your eyes. And that will be the most accurate measurement you can take. Phosphorus. We send out, we express a reminder about this every year, but we got to keep those samples clean. You have to use the bottles that we send to you. Those are clean bottles, phosphorus-free bottles that won't, you'll get a true reading from your lake. This is a picture of an actual sample we received from a volunteer many years ago. They misplaced their sampling bottles. It was the day for collecting their sample. They weren't sure what to do, so they grabbed the nearest plastic container that they had in their kitchen, an old cheese container. The lab will not accept samples not collected in those provided bottles. So pop bottles, cheese containers, medical sample containers. We have received all of those in the past. No, you have to use the bottles we send to you. If you can't find your bottles, or for some reason they don't show up, just reach out to us. We'll make sure you get them in plenty of time. And as Erick mentioned earlier in this presentation, those will be mailed out in the coming weeks to those of you who are enrolled in Summer Phosphorus. So stay tuned, you'll be getting a package soon. When you are labeling your samples, chlorophyll and especially phosphorus, we see what you're seeing on the slide here a lot. People use a marker that is not waterproof, and by the time it gets to us, all of the information that you carefully recorded on the label has been wiped off. And so then we have to switch into detective mode, trying to figure out whose bottle this is, where it was collected, when it was collected. Now, typically we have a fail-safe in that you'll have a copy of your data sheet included with your bottles, but sometimes those also get wet or are separated from the bottles. So make sure you use a pencil or a waterproof pen or marker to fill out those labels, so you don't send us on wild goose chases trying to figure out whose bottle this is, because that can take up a lot of time. Sharpies work great, and you can fill out your label before you even apply it to the bottle if that makes things easier. And again, a reminder, summer phosphorus bottles are being sent in as we speak, so you'll get them soon. All right, let's move on, and just a few notes about plant monitoring. Just one slide about that. Remember, you have to submit photographs of the plants that you see, especially for the Exotic Aquatic Plant Watch. We need photos of your invasive species to document that you actually saw what you wrote on your data sheet. So make sure to use the laminated measure card that we send to you when you enroll. If you don't have one of those handy, even a picture of it being held in your hand is helpful because that gives us a sense of scale. Make sure the photos aren't blurry. You can label them. Those laminated sheets you can actually write on with a dry erase marker, which is really handy. Like this example you see on the screen, you could write down the lake name and what your site number was, right on that, and then just wipe it off for your next photo. And make sure that you show the characteristics that led you to determine that it truly was the invasive species. So, as many of you know, for Eurasian water milfoil, being able to see the leaves very clearly, this volunteer has clipped off a whirl of leaves so you can see there's more than 12 pairs of leaflets, one of the distinguishing characters for Eurasian water milfoil. So these are really essential. You have to have pictures or we will put a note on the report saying it was not verified by photos. So please include photos with your report. All right, another question for you in the audience. If you're a chlorophyll sampler, or maybe you just know, before you take a chlorophyll sample, what do you have to measure first? Type answers in or speak up. There we go. All right. Yes, Margie, Mike, Greg, you got it. You got to take a Secchi measurement first. So you can click through a little bit. Yep, there's the Secchi measurement. Click through again. Take that Secchi depth reading. Another click for the second question. All right. So if your Secchi depth is 3.5 feet in this example, how far down do you lower your chlorophyll sampler into the lake? You have a 3.5 foot Secchi measurement. How far do you go? All right, we have our chlorophyll monitoring rock stars. Yes, what we call the composite depth, that's what's on your data sheet, is 2 times Secchi depth. So if you can see your Secchi disc that day, 3.5 feet down into the water, times that by 2. 2 times 3.5 is 7 feet. So you lower your sample down 7 feet, and that's what you record on your data sheet. We've had a few hiccups with some of the early season chlorophyll monitoring this season, where people were, instead of entering Secchi depth and composite depth on their data sheet, they were measuring the whole depth of the whole lake, the lake depth at their sampling site. And then, for example, we had a lake that's 65 feet deep. And so under Secchi depth, they wrote 65 feet. We knew that wasn't right. There's very few lakes in Michigan where you can see a Secchi disc more than 60 feet down. And then they lowered their chlorophyll sampler to 55 feet. That was unnecessary. So we were able to look at their Secchi data that they had already entered in the database, which was great. And the Secchi depth that day was 8 feet. So they should have only had to lower their chlorophyll sampler 16 feet. Twice that Secchi depth. So we've corrected that, but that was just one of several examples we saw this spring. So twice Secchi depth is how you measure your chlorophyll and collect your chlorophyll sample. And a really easy way to do it that we show in one of our training videos is after you take your Secchi measurement, say you could see it down 3.5 feet, so you know your composite sample depth should be 7 feet. take a clothespin or something and clip it right on the rope on your chlorophyll sampler. And that way, when you have lowered it down to 7 feet. And then you just let it, when you go to lower it, just lower it quickly into the water to that depth. When that clothespin hits the water surface, you're at the right depth and you can start pulling it up. Next slide. I think I might be getting to some of the questions here, but what if my lake is too shallow to go down twice the Secchi depth? Or there's a related question. What if I can see that my Secchi disc is sitting on the bottom of the lake? What am I supposed to do there? So all we want to do is make sure that you're not hitting the bottom. You don't want to bounce your sampler off the bottom. So your composite sample depth, which means the depth to which you should lower your sampler, should be 1 foot minus the depth of your lake. So let's say you wanted to drop it down. Your Secchi disc measurement suggests that you should lower your sampler 30 feet, but your lake is only 25 foot deep. Well, then lower your sample to 24 and record that as your composite depth so we know how far down you lowered your sampler. Again, just a reminder, don't hit the bottom. All right, chlorophyll filters. This is always a little bit of a challenge for folks. The filters are shipped to us with separator sheets. So the nice white filter is what you want to collect your samples on when you do your filtration, not those blue tissue paper separator sheets. They're kind of a pale blue. They might even look almost white to you, but they're a little bit see-through. They're more like a tissue paper. They're not filters. They won't work. And so look for the solid white kind of plastic looking discs. Those are your filters. We've got a little decal on there as a reminder, but we just want to remind you again here, because every year there's a few samples that come through that we discover that a volunteer filtered their sample onto a separator sheet instead of on a filter, and we don't get good results at the lab when that happens. So make sure to use those white filters. Another step, concern that we've heard from a few volunteers this spring is how to assemble filtration. So those of you who do chlorophyll know that you use the large plastic syringe to measure out 50 milliliters of water to be filtered. And once you have your 50 milliliters, you have this on the left, this filtration, the filter holder, the assembly. And be sure to attach this filter holder to your syringe using the area that we're highlighting with our arrow right now. See how it looks like kind of a little funnel or a little hat on top of the filter holder? That's the end, as you can see in the big picture, that should be popped on to the end of your syringe. That works really nicely. Do not do what's in the next photo and attach the syringe to the exit tube, which is on the underside of the filtration assembly. We've had a few volunteers have trouble with tearing their filters. They do their filtration, then they open up the assembly to take the filter out, and it's ripped, shredded, really wet, like it doesn't look right. And what we've discovered is happening is some people were basically attaching the filtration assembly upside down. They were attaching that straight exit tube to the syringe instead of the funnel area. And so what happens is when you attach the syringe to the funnel to the top, like you're supposed to, when you push on your syringe and start to filter the water through, it spreads the pressure of that water and sample across the entire filter. See how it's kind of shaped like a funnel? If you attach it on the wrong side, it's going to jet your water right through the center of that filter and rip a hole in it. So just make sure that you're attaching your filtration assembly correctly to the syringe. Put it on the top, the little hat or funnel, not on that narrow exit tube. Also, to avoid damaging your filter, even if you do have it set up correctly, follow Tamara's example here and make sure that you're not pushing really hard on your syringe. Remember that as the water is exiting through the filtration assembly, it should be coming out at what we call a rapid drip rate. It shouldn't be a jet of water, just dripping really, really fast. That's the right pressure. You don't have to go super slow, just enough to have really rapid drips coming out and push your sample through at that pressure. If it's faster than that, it may damage the filter, again, making it a non-accurate sample, and your result won't be accurate for your lake. Also, it can tear the filter if you put too much pressure. And if you are in a lake that has a lot of algae or other material in the water, you may find that you can't keep a rapid drip rate going. Your filter is basically getting clogged. And if that happens, there's a place on your data sheet where you can just record how much sample you actually push through. It may not be the full 50 milliliters. So just write down how much you were able to filter. Was it 40? Was it 30? We have one lake that can only get about 5 or 6 milliliters through their filter because it's a highly productive lake. So don't risk tearing your filter. Just wrap it, drip it until you can't get it to do it anymore. And that is when you should lay off the pressure. Finally, one more note about chlorophyll specifically, be sure to wrap your sample vials in foil before you stick them in the freezer. Chlorophyll will degrade when it's exposed to light, and so when we receive sample vials with filters in them that don't have foil wrapped around them, we throw them away immediately because we know that that result has been compromised. So be sure to wrap those vials in foil. But remember, you don't need to do this for phosphorus. We do sometimes get phosphorus bottles that are also wrapped in foil. That's unnecessary. It doesn't hurt anything, but you might as well save your foil for something else. Data forms. We can't emphasize this enough. It's really important to fill out every blank on your chlorophyll or all your data forms, front and back. We don't ask for information we don't need, which means that every question on those data forms is information we do need. So all your information about lake name and county, township, who helped collect them. You can see on this chlorophyll example, there's a place to write if you couldn't filter all 50 cc's. That's all very important. On the back of your data sheet, the map is incredibly important. You can draw a map, you can attach a map, whatever is easiest for you, but your map should show your lake. It should mark where your sampling location is, and you should write on it how deep the lake is at that sampling location. You'll also see right above the box for the map, there's a place for you to write the surface area of your lake. That's really important for us because sometimes we find that the sampling location has changed over time and we didn't realize that till we started looking at the maps, or maybe there's some confusion about where the right place to sample is. So please do that. And also at the very top of the back of your sheet, fill out the blank that asks you to fill in lake name, county, and field ID number. We know this can feel somewhat repetitive. You know, you're like, how many maps do I need to send these people? But every sample is considered differently and separately in our system. So we need to have that map attached to every data sheet. And having that information about your lake name at the top is really valuable because all of these data sheets get scanned into our electronic data archive system. And the front and back scan could get separated. So we need that information at the top of the back of the sheet. We deeply appreciate that and the effort, the few extra moments it might take you to fill all that out. Dissolved oxygen and temperature. If you are involved with dissolved oxygen and temperature monitoring, a few things that will make your life easier. Turn on your meter about 15 minutes prior to going through the calibration process. That helps the meter stabilize. It'll make calibration go a lot smoother for you. Make sure to keep the sponge in the calibration chamber around the sensor wet, but without standing water. Don't fill the whole chamber with water and store it that way. Just make sure that sponge at the bottom of the sleeve that goes over the probe is nice and damp. Make sure that the meter is set to collect dissolved oxygen information in milligrams per liter. And not percent saturation. We want milligrams per liter as it shows on your data sheet. And make sure that temperature is set to Celsius and not Fahrenheit. Be nice to the cables. If anything fails on these meters, it's the cable. And so that can happen from being handled roughly or crimped, shut in the case. Don't carry your probe by the cable. Especially, you know, near the spot where it attaches to the handheld meter itself. That's a sensitive area. And, you know, every year we have to replace a few cables due to damage. So be nice to the cables. And then finally, keep the case open after use until everything is dry. We do receive meters back at the end of the season that are moldy inside. That's not good for the meter or for us. So we appreciate you, kind of when you're done, come back to your garage or your home or wherever you store your meter and just keep everything open, maybe for 24 hours, let it all dry out nice before you close it up, especially if you have one of our hard cases. Those are waterproof. They do not let any water in or out. So if that meter is damp and you seal that hard case, you're almost guaranteeing you're going to have a mold problem. Finally, when you're actually on the lake and collecting your dissolved oxygen measurement, make sure that you are anchored and staying in place, because what can happen, you're going to be sitting there for a while taking those measurements all the way down through the water column, and you want to be staying in one place. So make sure you're anchored well and not drifting. That's really important. And it's good to, before you start actually taking your measurements, to double check the depth where you're at with a depth finder or lowering a weighted line, because you don't want to drag your sensor on your DO meter in the mud at the bottom of your lake or bounce it off rocks or whatever you have at the bottom of your lake. The graph that we're showing here is an example of somebody who collected their measurements from the surface down to the bottom, and they have real good looking measurements all the way down. And then suddenly at the very last reading, they lost all their oxygen. It wasn't gradual, it happened really dramatically. And that's typically an indication that they're measuring too deep. You went too far and your sensor's laying in the mud on the bottom of the lake. So we don't want that. That data point is not useful. And so and it can damage your sensor. So make sure you're not hitting the bottom with that sensor. All right, just a couple other little reminders and then we can get to questions. All of these trainings, and Eric even mentioned this, all of the training that we gave through PowerPoint slides and so forth is available on the website. All you need to do is click on the parameter you're interested in. So there's the training videos, and then there's also videos that show in the field, actually the process of collecting, the process of filtration here if you're looking for chlorophyll. So we've got lots of resources online for you. So please, if you need a refresher, or if you have an assisting volunteer that joined you and wasn't able to participate in any of our training we did in May, these videos are an excellent resource and really should be watched by anyone who's collecting data in the program. A couple of thank yous and opportunities to wrap up. We want to thank everyone. Maybe some of you participated in the MiCorps Aquatic Invasive Species Detection Blitz. That ended on July 12th. It was a 2-week period where we invited you to report any aquatic invasive species from your lake into iNaturalist. And we had 172 people from around the state of Michigan participate and send information in. And there's a list there of the most commonly reported aquatic invasive species. So as you can see, it wasn't just limited to underwater plants. We had lots of reports of Phragmites and cattails, purple loosestrife. Also reported, though not most commonly, were things like the Chinese mystery snail, rusty crayfish, and things like that. So we're working hard. That program just ended earlier this week, so we'll be developing a summary report about that, and we'll be excited to share with you all what we learned and sharing that information. And then finally, if you haven't already, be sure to put on your calendar November 6th. The 2026 MiCorps conference will be November 6th in Muskegon at the Delta Hotels. We're really excited. Those of you who go to the MLSA conference will be familiar with this location. It's the hotel attached to the convention center in Muskegon, where Michigan Lakes and Streams has held their annual conference for the last couple of years. So that's where we'll be. It's a great opportunity to meet other volunteers that do both lake and stream monitoring across Michigan as part of MiCorps. We'll have some really great presentations and workshops, and we haven't finalized the agenda yet, so more details, including the agenda and registration opportunities, will open soon. All right, questions. I think we can dive in. I've seen a lot of stuff coming in, Eric, through the chat, so maybe we can dive into those.
I couldn't type and move the presentation forward efficiently,
No,
so we'll work through. So, and Joe, I'll take a first couple and I'll blend them back and forth here.
Sounds great.
I'll take the first couple here. So will this recording be available on our website? Yes, we will record it. We're going to make some edits to it to make sure it looks pretty, and then we'll be on the training website. So I will let everybody know when that's available as well, so you can share it along. Will there be an in-person training next year? Yes, it will be in Muskegon. I think the date is maybe not advertised. End of April, beginning of May is when it will be. And it will be in Muskegon. We will also have an online training where we go through everything as well, usually just a few days after the in-person training. Should you calibrate your DO meter before going out on the lake? Or should you calibrate at the sampling location conditions? You should, so turn on that fit, turn it on. Usually what we say is you're getting ready to go out onto the boat. You can turn on your meter, open up your case, turn on your meter. And then when you get out to your location, you can calibrate there. Calibration we are now all, I think almost everybody is using a YSI Pro 20, and calibration is easy and quick. And so even if you're transporting it out to your sampling location and you're at your 15 minutes, you can calibrate there. My first sample for chlorophyll and second replicate sample were very different. So I'm guessing Greg, what you're saying there is the results ended up being different. One was maybe more and then less. I'm guessing I didn't have the sample mixed up well and had everything settled to the bottom of the bottle. And yet, so that's a great observation. So before you pull up water in your syringe for chlorophyll, don't shake the bottle, but with your with the cap on, invert it a few times because the algae cells will settle down to the bottom. And so to get consistent measurements, give that little shake or give that inversion, pull it up. Now, just to let you know though, there can be natural variation between replicates, which seems very strange, right? But for example, you might suck up, even with it fully mixed, you might suck up a big zooplankton called a Daphnia that's full of algae in some of your sample and not in the replicate sample. And that can now skew some of your results as well. So there is some natural variation that can occur. All right, Joe, I'll just give you some now.
Sure, yeah, I'm going to go back quite a ways. And so Cindy on Starvation Lake had a question about plant samples. She said, this will be my first year doing plant monitoring. Say some might not be invasive. Is it okay to send samples of unusual plants, et cetera, that have not been evident before? We're seeing high water and some changes in your plant life. Cindy, those are really good questions. So the focus of the Exotic Aquatic Plant Watch is, of course, on those 5 aquatic invasive species that you've been trained to recognize. And so that's what the focus is. And so if you find any of those, definitely include pictures of those samples or of those plants. You can also include other plants that you're curious about in your reports. You can include photos of those as well. Another thing I'll mention is that before you actually submit your final report, you are welcome to reach out to us with pictures of plants that you're just unsure what you're looking at. It doesn't matter if it's invasive or not, or if you just don't know. We're happy to look at photos of the plants that you're seeing and help you identify them. So we're a resource for you on that. Both Eric and I can help with that, and you can reach out to us or even just to the general email address, micorps@msu.edu, send your pictures, and we can help you figure out what you're looking at. So that's a really good question. Thanks for asking it. Margie asked about data entry. Can assistant volunteers enter data or just lead volunteers? Both can. That's another benefit of if you have assisting volunteers of making sure that they register, set up a profile and say what lake they're working on. As long as they've done that, including saying what lake they're working on, they will be able to log in and enter data on your lake. The lead doesn't have to do all of that. So that's a benefit of having your assisting volunteers sign up. Jerry was asking, how many data entries do you need to put in before the program will give you a graph? It varies a little bit depending on which parameter you're talking about, but, and Eric, maybe you can correct me on this, but I think we need to have at least a year's worth of samples for like more than 1 year for Secchi, chlorophyll. Like you do have to have a minimum number, but it varies by parameter.
It varies by parameter. It might be 3 years, for example, for a trend line. But when you go on to, and that's in our individual reports, but if you do go into our, what Joe showed as the database, a very simplistic graph will be created with individual data points. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, and I'll also
Individual
mention,
year data points.
yeah, there's two different times where a graph is produced, right? Right in the data exchange. If you go in online and are looking at data and you hit view graph, it'll either say not enough data or it'll present you with a graph. There's also graphs provided in the individual lake report, the PDF that we develop and either send to you hard copy if you order one, or you can have it emailed to you. We generate graphs kind of more by hand for that. So there's a couple different ways that we share graphs with you about your data. A question about Secchi measurement, and not a silly question, even though the asker phrased it that way. What is the difference between measuring Secchi down, Secchi up, versus taking two Secchi down readings and divided by 2? Good question. And so those of you who might not understand, what I think the asker is talking about is that in our procedures, we recommend that you lower the Secchi disc down till you can no longer see it, jot down that measurement, and then you slowly pull it up until you can see it again, jot that down, and then record the average of that. So that's kind of Secchi up, Secchi down is what I'm guessing they're thinking about. And that's the way to do it because it can be a little tough sometimes. Those of you who have experience doing Secchi, you know, can I see it? Can I not? So taking that average between when you know you can't see it anymore and when you know you absolutely can, depending on conditions, that can be a pretty big interval. That really gives us the truest reading of how far light is penetrating into your lake. It's not asking you to just measure it twice and average it. That's what we're trying to get, because there can be some, question in your mind about whether you're actually seeing it or not. So that's why we want you to record when it disappears completely, record when you know for sure you can see it as you're pulling it back up, and then report the average. I hope that answers that question. All right, Jim, when I enter the Secchi disk data, it would be nice if some of the data fields carried over when I was entering multiple weeks of data. For example, my name. Jim, I feel ya. We help enter data for our volunteers in the winter, and so we're doing it the same way you are, and we sure wish that would carry over too. And in fact, we know that, and we're fixing that. Those kinds of things are being fixed in our new data entry system that you'll get to see in the next year or two. So absolutely, we're going to do everything we can to make data entry more efficient in the coming years. So if folks have other suggestions about things they'd like to see, send them our way, because we have a long list that we're sharing with our programmers. All right, I think we answered some of that. One of the question was, oh, when we were talking about chlorophyll and kind of what if your lake is too shallow, a few comments came in. And one particular person asked about, and it was a direct message to me about, well, what if twice the Secchi depth is below the thermocline? So I think what
Cool.
we're thinking about there is that, when we measure temperature in our lakes, typically, if you go out and do it this time of year, you'll see it's pretty warm for the several feet, and then you'll hit a point, like a layer in your lake, where it gets colder quickly. That's called the thermocline. That's a place of rapid temperature change, because colder water sinks to the bottom of your lake, but if it's hot outside, the top layer of water is going to be pretty warm. And so I'm thinking the concern here is, why would I want to sample for chlorophyll, for algae below the thermocline? We still want you to do that. You don't need to worry about what the water temperature is, because what we're really trying to capture by having you drop your sampler down to twice Secchi disk is that's the depth of light penetration. Light is the limiting factor here for algae that we're trying to respond to. So even though, I might be able to see that Secchi disk down 3.5 feet, even light that's not detectable by our eyes and allowing us to see the Secchi disk goes down about twice as far. That's what our lake science has taught us. And so we know that algae can still be photosynthesizing, getting enough sunlight to grow. at twice the Secchi depth. And so that's what we are trying to capture by asking you to lower your chlorophyll sampler down to twice Secchi depth. But I'm glad you're thinking about this stuff because
Yeah, I
all
was
of
gonna.
those things,
That's cool.
yeah, influence algae growth. That's cool. But in this case, that's why the procedure has you sample at that depth.
And Joe, I just want to mention for that person and for any of you who have that scenario is take a look at your oxygen. It might give you a clue that as well that there's a lot of photosynthesis happening around the thermocline. So you have your temperature showing your thermocline, then take a look. Do you get a bump in oxygen there? That might show, and if there is a bump of oxygen, that's showing an algal lens. So algae are actually congregating there, photosynthesizing and releasing oxygen. And so by your sampler going through that area, the 2 times Secchi, as Joe is saying, you're actually capturing that lens of algae, which is giving you a better sense of the algal productivity uh, in the photic zone of your lake. So it's pretty neat.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right, Eric, I've kind of lost track of which questions you've answered.
Okay, I think we got close where we met up. I'll go through, I'll just reemphasize one that I answered quick is any chance for an in-person training in the UP in addition to the Muskegon? The answer is for sure. We do it actually every so many years, often in Iron or Gogebic counties. And it is time for us to start discussing that again. So actually, the team will be discussing that this fall when we start thinking about training for next year for 2027. So stay tuned for that. How late in the season can you have a clear phase? And so, John, I think the clear water phase, lakes can actually have clear water phases caused by Daphnia, zooplankton filter feeding in the water, can actually occur throughout a season, and you can have multiple of them through the summer. The classic one, and many times the most prominent one, is the spring clear water phase happening kind of near the end of spring mixing, beginning of stratification. That's where you have the spring clear water phase, but you can have multiple. And your Secchi disk readings, if you're collecting them weekly, should be able to detect that. Okay, we are using the YSI instrument for DO. After a membrane change, is it acceptable to use the percent DO calibration feature, even though we are measuring milligrams per liter? Joe, Cindy, or sorry, not Cindy, Chuck. Feel free to either unmute yourself or type in just for clarification. After a membrane change, is it acceptable to use the percent DO calibration feature, even though we are using milligrams per liter?
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure
I'll
what
just need
Chuck's
some,
asking there. Yeah,
feel
but
free to,
yeah, Chuck, if you're still on.
Oh, hi. I guess from looking at that manual, there's a complicated procedure for calibrating the instrument after you do a membrane change or just calibrating in general for milligrams per liter. Um, and I was just wondering, is that equivalent when you do after you do a membrane change? Do you have to go through the process? Is the percent oxygen calibration sufficient for the accuracy of the instrument?
I see. I think the answer is yes, but I will say I'm gonna double check unless Joe, you have something off the top of your head.
Yeah, that's a good question. Chuck, are you using a Pro 20?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, we have yeah, that's a really good question. And honestly, our colleague Tamara has been working with people through their membrane changes most recently. So I'm a little rusty on what those steps are, but we can look into that for you and get a solid answer for you because we want your instrument to be working as well as possible.
Yeah.
It,
Okay. Because we borrow ours from the Elgin Conservation District,
Mhm.
and I know they did a membrane change before they gave it to us for the season. So that's basically my question.
Yeah,
I
and you
would I
don't
would
know
I
if,
would think yeah I would think that if you calibrate it using the percent DO, that should be adequate, but because that's the only way you can really tell.
I think so. But yeah, Chuck, could
yeah,
you email us and then
yeah.
that'll help us because I have a note, but I just want to make sure we don't miss following up with you.
Yep. Yeah, I can do that. Thanks.
Perfect. Okay, I'll just keep moving through. And by the way, everybody, it is we had this scheduled from 10 to 11, but this is a great discussion. And so Joe, you and I think I'm happy to keep answering questions.
Sure.
But if you have to leave, thank you for joining us. We hope this has been helpful. Again, we'll still be here answering questions. So as long as they come in, we'll answer for you. Okay, so can TSI values be calculated from only one set of parameters? The answer is yes. So you can calculate from using SECI alone, phosphorus, summer phosphorus alone, and chlorophyll alone. They each can tell. So then, so yes, obviously more data being averaged is better, but we have a set of significant change in SECI from the major rains we have had. Okay, so yeah, so when calculating TSI, so that's your trophic state index, it is best to actually keep everything separate. So we would calculate TSI for SECI, for phosphorus, and for chlorophyll. And then we look at that number to get us a sense of where you lie in the spread of what can be for trophic status. So oligotrophic, mesotrophic, eutrophic. We look at them individually because they might tell us something different. We have a lake, for example, in Muskegon County that has very low SECI disk, very like a foot SECI, and the chlorophyll is almost non-existent. So what do you all think that could be from, right? So now suddenly, if we averaged these together, we could get a skewed result. What this is telling us is that, look, there's a lot of suspended solids, so suspended sediments in that lake. So it's more brown water, not green water. And so low SECI was a result not of algae, but of suspended sediments. And so having all this data through time, so the more data is better and can really help us get a sense of what's going on in your lake. When thinking about significant change in SECI with the major rains, that's awesome. What I would do is, or you detecting that, this is the benefit of, or the joys of long-term data, is that you can start to see signatures like this in your lake. I wouldn't necessarily even, unless this is a long-term change that has happened from climatic conditions, I would just look at the data itself, not necessarily converting it to TSI values. So just look at your SECI through time, and that can be very telling enough instead of converting it to TSI. But feel free to reach out. I'd be happy to chat with you about that. YSI Pro 20, DO, the values are constantly ranging by plus or minus 0.5 milligrams per liter while trying to take a reading. And this person is concerned by that. Understood. Yes. So that is what happens. Your DO meter, when your probe goes to your layer and you are supposed to jig it, so you're having water go in and out of the membrane, it doesn't settle on one number. As many of you know who have had this, it does bounce around. That plus or minus 0.5 milligrams per liter is what everybody experiences. And when you are at a spot, what you're doing, let it be there for a little bit, jig it up and down, and when it generally settles, so it's not bouncing super far in like 2 milligram per liter difference, 1 milligram, you're under 1, you can settle on a number then. So don't be concerned, your meter is doing what it's supposed to. It is just not perfect at getting you to one number and settling there.
While you're looking at some of those things, Eric, I was able to do a little quick research for Chuck about his calibration question. And I think we were able to answer it. I sent him I replied with a link to the manual that discusses it, but it does state, in case anyone else is interested, that calibration of any option, percent, milligrams per liter, or parts per million, will automatically calibrate the others. So following the percent calibration process after a membrane change is sufficient. So good news.
That's great.
Yeah.
Exactly. And again, I might be missing some. So again, please, you can write it in again. We apologize just because they're coming in. Here's one at the bottom. We had several instances of brown-black particles floating just under the surface of the lake this spring. Looked like black smoke in the water. Someone has suggested this could be due to diatoms. Do you agree? It does not look like soil particles or sediment. Interesting. The first thing I would say is the way we would have to be able to confirm is that taking a sample and looking at it underneath the microscope. There can be all sorts of funky things that can be in our water. Like just as an example, it could be, I mentioned the clear water phase caused by a little zooplankton called Daphnia. At some points in a Daphnia's life cycle, they start to create a egg inside of them, a specific kind of egg, and it's dark colored. And this egg might be able to survive in the sediment of your lake for decades under right conditions. But now you have these little microscopic organisms fluttering around in the water with a black egg in its back. And could it be that? Sure. But it also could be XYZ sort of thing. So diatoms sometimes they can make your water look a little, not necessarily, diatoms are an algae that's common in our lakes, found in every single lake. And at certain times of year when they are blooming, they can make the water sometimes maybe more brownish or yellowish, depending on the type of algae. But actual black particles, I'm not sure. Wind-blown dust, it could be something. So yeah, I would say if you see something like that, if you have a microscope, that would be great. Also, you can contact us with pictures and we can make some suggestions for that time.
I think we got through them. But as we said before, I put it in the chat as well. If you have other questions for us, you can always reach us. You can contact us directly, individually, or the email address on the screen. That's the easiest. Shoot an email to micorps@msu.edu, and we will make sure the person best suited to answer your question gets back to you. At this point, I think we're going to wrap things up. Again, this is all recorded, and we've talked through questions. You'll be able to see these slides. If you have folks assisting you that haven't seen this, or please share it with them. We're going to try to get this up on the website by the end of the day tomorrow, so it's available for you as you're carrying out the rest of your monitoring this summer. Thank you so much for all of your efforts and your time that you put into monitoring and the great questions that you asked. And of course, thank you, Eric. Thanks for joining me on this webinar today. We hope it's helpful for everyone, and maybe we'll see some of you out on the water this summer.
Lakes are so awesome. And so I'm so happy all of you are collecting data and trying to figure out and see how awesome they are. So have a great day.
All right. Thanks, everyone.